Chapter 12. Where we stand in this relationship. Guntapat was looking for a guest speaker to deliver the knowledge of depression to people in the community under his care. The best choice would be Dr. Kanokpon, or Dr. Pang from Psychiatric Department. Gun opened the door and smiled at the nurse sitting in the office of the inpatient department. "Is Dr. Kanokpon here?"
"Yes, she's just finishing her therapy session. She'll be out in minutes, Dr. Gunn."
The young nurse swiftly got to her feet.
"I'll get her for you."
"Thanks a lot." Gunn didn't have to wait long before he saw a female physician wearing a light peach chiffon blouse opening the glass door in the nurse's office. Gunn greeted her humbly as she was older than him. "Pong, it's been quite a while." "Gunn, as soon as I see your face, I just know you must have something in store for me." Dr. Pang laughed. "Where do you want me to be this time?" "I want you to give a lecture of the VHV at the municipal's auditorium. We provide free lunch." Pang gave him the thumbs up. "Anything for you, Gunn. If you're less handsome, I might hesitate a little." Gunn and the nurse standing nearby laughed. Dr. Pang always had a good sense of humor. She was a psychiatrist who took very good care of her mind, and she always shared her generous mind with others. "Are you busy lately, Pang?" "Oh!" Someone screamed drew Gunn's attention. What he saw through the glass between the nurse's office and the ward was an incredibly thin body of a male patient falling to the floor on his bottom. A male nurse was trying to support the patient up, but to no avail. That patient looked at Gunn with his eyes nearly popped out of his head. He seemed terrified out of his life. Scrambling backward, his lips and hands were shaking. "Grim Reaper!" He pointed his finger at Gunn's direction. "The Grim Reaper!" After the patient cried out, the eyes of every person in the room were on Gunn. But he simply looked at the patient. His face was as calm as the windless sea. Two other nurses ran out to hold down the patient, who seemed to be even more out of control. Dr. Pang let out a loud sigh. "We talked casually just minutes ago." Pang patted Gunn on his shoulder. "I'll take a look at him. You just send me the schedule in line chat. I'll be there." "Thank you so much, Pang." Gunn smiled at her. "I hope peace returned to your ward soon." "Only this case is rather difficult." Pang nodded to excuse herself. Gunn turned on his heels and walked towards the exit. The patient's howling was constantly echoed through the ward. He kept crying, screaming, and repeatedly shouting the word, "The Grim Reaper, the Grim Reaper." No one explained what had happened to this patient to Gunn, which was understandable since it was the department's standard patient confidentiality. Gunn hoped the patient would recover from his condition soon, because being pointed at and called as the Grim Reaper so abruptly left him quite startled. A man in a white t-shirt and police pants were standing on a pathway by a river. His gaze wandered to the sky above, which was painted with the golden light of the setting sun. In the next few minutes, the night would arrive. His mind kept dwelling on his terminal patient's case that he put his effort into finding tons of evidence, but was taken away before his own eyes. It might be a good thing since he still had a massive unfinished case file, which he had to finish soon. Nevertheless, he was indignant at the thought of it. Vassan threw a stone into the river, watching ripples gradually disappeared. He had to keep his head cool and regain his formidableness, acting like water under the bridge. Suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps approaching behind Vassan, making him turn back. A man in dark blue shirt stared right back at him with eyes as warm as the setting sun. Vassan took a few steps back and leaned on the fence. He looked at the man who just came and took a spot next to him to watch the sun. We both are sinners in this gorgeous world. Vasan turned to face the wind coming from another direction. It's a sin that defines what is right and wrong. It's unchangeable. I didn't know you were a poet. I'm not a poet. I just tried to say, what's wrong with being gay, you motherfucker? In an eloquent way. Gunn chuckled. Seems like it conveys an entirely different meaning from what you've previously said. Vasan shook his head. Don't mind me. Right now, it's like my brain has been hammered to pieces. I don't think you would find any coherence from what I said. Vasan was quiet for a moment. Gunn, can I ask you something? Yeah? Are you just an unlucky bystander or a murderer in disguise? Vasan's sharp eyes took a glance at Gunn's face. Gunn stared defiantly right back at the person who had questioned him. I'm an unlucky bystander. I wish I could trust you 100%. I want to believe every single word you said, but as a cop, I couldn't do that until the mystery is unraveled. Not until I could prove that you truly have nothing to do with it. Vasan stared at the handsome face before him. I call you out here to talk about where we are standing in this relationship. Please allow me to speak first, Gunn immediately replied. I don't know where we are if you asked me because it also depends on your answer, but what I want is to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to get up in the morning with you, sleep next to you, make love to you, hold you in my arms, take good care of you. And I want to have you in every important occasion in my life, to be my support, to be the most important person for me. Vasan fell silent for a while before casting his eyes downward. You know I can't say that. I understand. As long as this mess hasn't unraveled, you wouldn't trust me. Gunn reached for Vasan's hand on the fence. Tell me what you want. Vasan pulled his hand and turned his entire body to face Gunn. I want to do the right thing, as a police officer. If you're innocent, I'll be yours. But if you're the murderer... The wind blew, casting the leaves to rustle. Dry leaves during dry season fell on the ground between them. I'll be the one who cuffs your hands, throws you in the jail, and watches you get a death penalty. Gunn didn't look perturbed in the slightest. He was still calm and fearless. The corners of his lips slowly pulled up into a smile, making his face as warm as the sun. If so, you'll definitely be mine. And this is where we stand until everything is solved. We should stop contacting each other from now on. Vasan looked up when he finished his sentence, trying to block this overwhelming emotion in his chest. He quickly walked away in need of being far away from the man he had left behind. He didn't want to hear Gunn's voice or see his face longer than this. He wanted Gunn to hug him, kiss him, and touch him. He was falling in love, hard. So hard that his eyes blinded by it. So hard that he couldn't see what was right. So he should stop before it's too late. Before his heart fell into this deep infatuation pit and would never be able to climb out of it. Must say I've found many bruises on your body, Inspector. Bunnicket wrote down the record of injuries on the chart. At the moment, they were in a small room that was divided within the emergency room to serve as Dr. Bunnicket's examination room for the forensic patients. Every mysterious case was not a stranger to this tiny room, because it was where Dr. Bunnicket performed physical examinations and recorded what he found to help solve a criminal case. There's scratches, probably with nails, on your chin and your neck. It'd be awesome if I could remember the whole thing. Vasan put on his t-shirt after the examination was done. How was the autopsy result of pharmacist Boo's, Doctor? It's not as clear as we saw. Bun put the chart down on his desk, looking at the door of the examination room. The hanging and the suicide note were just a perfect staging. Vassan's eyes widened. What do you mean? You'd better wait for the autopsy official report, Inspector Vassan. He pulled off his gloves. And you should pick up that call.
Banakit was talking about a phone that vibrated non-stop in Vassan's pocket. Vassan heaved a sigh, pulling it out and hanging up the call dismissively.
I'll find a way to block that number. I'm sorry I distracted you. If you really wanted to block that number, you'd have done it a long time ago.
Banakit's comments stunned Vassan because it was the truth.
Please wait for a medical certificate for a moment, Inspector.
Banakit sat down and took out a medical certificate form from the desk drawers. Vassan watched the man in front of him before blurting out a question.
What do you know about Dr. Guntabat?
Banakit halted his hand. He leaned into his chair before turning to look at Vassan with a thoughtful expression.
Dr. Gunn was a family physician. His distinctive role was to provide palliative care to the untreatable patients who were sort of waiting for their deaths. But during the waiting, Dr. Gunn would do his best to help ease their symptoms as well as their mental health. What is he like?
Banakit could sense Vassan's changing tone. Vassan shouldn't be the emotional sensitive type of person, but right now he seemed like the sand dune about to be collapsed any moment.
A mysterious man. These words describe him best since we've known each other 3 years ago. I barely know anything about him. I didn't even know what he was like. He was a person whom you can't tell what he was thinking.
His intelligent eyes stared at Vassan's face.
But you should know him better than I do. Well, the story is disseminated everywhere. About him and me.
Vassan heaved a sigh.
Don't worry, I'm not judging you. Now I also have a complicated relationship with a man.
Bun said it out so that Vassan would be more comfortable, which he was. Despite sharing the same occupation, he felt that Banakit was 10 times more approachable than Guntabat.
But overall, Dr. Gunn is a good man. He's praised by all. He contributed many works for the hospital and even got an Outstanding Physician Award recently. Director Somsak really likes him.
The phone rang again, and Vassan quickly pulled it out to hang up for how many times he had lost count.
Are there any unusual rumors about him? It might be easy if he showed some suspicious behavior. Unfortunately, I got none. The strangest thing I heard about Dr. Gunn was that his name appeared on Pharmacist Boo's suicide note, and that he's dating you. I'm not...
Vassan felt that he had enough of trying to refuse.
If you know any strange rumors about him, please let me know. Of course.
Banakit signed his name on the bottom right section of paper.
It's done. There were no serious external injuries, but benzodiazepam was found in your blood on a level that could result in drowsiness. Thank you.
Vassan received his medical certificate and got to his feet.
I've got to get back to work, Dr. Bun.
Guntabat dropped his hand that was holding his phone on a table, his brows tightly knitted. He let out his breath, absently looking out the examination room, which now only a few patients remained, waiting for their medicine. Tay walked towards him, dragging a chair to sit across from Gun.
I've never seen you this upset.
Tay turned to an entrance at the back.
Lek, could you please give Doc a glass of water?
Gun closed his eyes momentarily to collect himself before opening them with the smile everyone was familiar with.
I've got a lot of work lately, Tay. Must be work at the hospital. I've heard your palliative project was going well, that many sectors request for study visits. That's because Professor Somsak gives me his support. Fortunately, he sees the importance of my work.
Gunn looked over his phone, which was responsible for someone's missed calls that escalated to double digits.
I have a meeting this afternoon. If a case comes in, you can call me any minutes. Okay, Doc.
Tay watched Gunn collect his belongings into the satchel and hurriedly walking out, forgetting an expensive golden fountain pen and his stet on the table.
"Dr. Gunn, wait! You forgot these. Again."
Gunn turned around, shaking his head, irritated with himself. He accepted the things from Tay.
"My brain is getting rusty. Perhaps the problem isn't that you're forgetful like an old man, but you're losing focus."
Tay patted Gunn on his shoulder.
"Please try to get some rest." "Thank you."
Gunn offered his smile before hurried out of the examination room, where he usually provided a checkup for people with chronic diseases such as diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, and hypertension every Tuesday. He picked up his phone and called Vassan again, but the result was the same. Vassan cut him off.
"Vassan, don't do this."
Gunn had never been this agitated in his life. He told himself he would never let Vassan walk away easily, but how did it turn out like this? He drove to the hospital that was 5 kilometers away. After the meeting, Gunn would rush to meet with one of his palliative care patients and then head to Vassan's home. If Vassan was on duty, he would go to the police station. Gunn needed to see Vassan today, before his anxiety would destroy him until he couldn't get back to normal again. Gunn parked his car in the area reserved for doctors. He intended to pass through the emergency room towards a walkway between 2 buildings, when he saw a man in a khaki uniform walking out of the emergency room with a clasped envelope in his hands. Vassan looked back at Gunn, and the two of them jerked to a halt, startling with this coincidence.
"Vassan!"
Gunn called his name. Vassan turned on his heels, preparing to walk away, but Gunn rushed to block his way.
"Why didn't you pick up my call?" "Move. I have to get back to work," he told him without meeting his eyes.
Gunn grabbed Vassan's hand and squeezed it firmly. He didn't care the passerby's gaze. Vassan looked up at Gunn with his eyes widening.
"Don't disappear like this, please."
This was the first time Vassan saw the angry look in Gunn's eyes.
"You can wait until the mystery untangles, but don't just disappear on me. You have the right to command me what to do."
Vassan tried to pull his hand away, but Gunn tightened his grip on the wrist.
"Why don't we talk and solve this problem together? Since you come here, the number of terminal stage patients' death has increased. The latest one was proven to die from lethal injection. Then your name popped up in the crime scene. Everything related to you and all over you. How can I be so closely related to the man who seemed so suspicious?"
Vassan lowered his voice.
"How can you expect me to trust a man who might be involved in my mother's death?"
Gunn's grip went limp. Vassan successfully pulled his hand away in that moment. He quickly took a step back and pointed his finger at Gunn.
"If you ever do this again, I'll throw you on the ground, handcuff you, and you'll be charged with an assault on the officer in the execution of his duty."
Gunn stood still while keeping his head down.
"If I could prove my innocence, will you come back to me?"
Vassan gave him a silent. Gunn looked up at him. His eyes that were once so warm now seemed empty.
"I promised to myself that I wouldn't let you go that easily. If proving that I've nothing to do with any of this is my only chance with you, then no matter how dangerous it is, I'll do it."
Vassan pressed his lips together. He decided not to exchange words with Gunn any longer. However, after Vassan took a few steps forward, he stopped in his track and turned back without looking at the other man's face.
"If you're innocent and you find any clues, tell the police. Do not keep it to yourself or you'll be in danger."
After having finished talking, he walked away. Gunn stood still, watching Vassan disappear from his eyesight, even if Vassan decided to run away from him for now. But the last thing he said really showed his sympathy. That made Gunn's heavy heart lighten up a little bit. He could see a glimpse of hope despite its faint light.
It was a hope to make Vassan belong solely to him forever. Vassan walked back to his motorbike, the one he usually used for personal errands near his workplace. On its seat was a man in a black leather jacket and a pair of jeans. He heaved out a long sigh when he saw the man's bugging face.
"In this freaking hot weather, why on earth do you have to dress like that?" "For shielding my skin from the sun and for coolness' sake, Inspector."
The man got up and walked towards Vassan.
"What are you doing here, Lieutenant Kong?"
The man who looked the least like a police officer shrugged his shoulders. For the outsiders, they might see Lieutenant Kong as a drinking teenager who had no sustainable job more than a police officer.
"Looking for something unusual in this hospital." "What did you find?"
"Not much. But the deputy doesn't want any private business nonsense." Lieutenant Kong winked at Vassan, which was very annoying.
"Are you keeping an eye on me?"
Vassan knitted his eyebrows.
"Not you. It's him. But when I keep an eye on him, I also see you in the frame."
Lieutenant Kong protruded his mouth to the hospital building.
"My minion could only gather teeny-weeny information. It's all useless, so I want to talk to you." "What is it?" "Put your intimacy with Dr. Gunterpat to use. Pull out information for us."
Kong looked left and right, making sure no one stopped on his track to listen to their conversation.
"What did he tell you?" "I don't know anything more than you do, because he and I are now nothing more than acquaintances."
Vassan pushed Kong out of the way.
"I need to hurry. I have to conduct an interrogation in 15 minutes. "Inspector?"
Kong spoke before Vassan could mount on his motorbike.
"Because that teeny-weeny information wouldn't be useful for us, I want to propose an effective method that works just fine for me. We should get him drunk and hide a voice recorder somewhere. I don't think anyone would be more suitable for this job other than you, Inspector. Only 2 people in a room, with alcohol in a level that could make people open their hearts. I think we might get something nice out of it."
While talking, Lieutenant Kong handed Vassan a mini voice recorder. Vassan looked at the thing in front of him and showed a sign of dissatisfaction.
"Finding evidence isn't my responsibility."
"But it's my duty to use the most effective method to collect evidence." Lieutenant Kong shook the voice recorder in his hand. "It'd be ashamed if you felt uncomfortable, but I don't think sending my minion or myself to get close to Dr. Gunn would do. If you won't do it, then Deputy Superintendent Burt might get even more suspicious." Vassan pulled the tiny voice recorder from Lieutenant Kong.
"Leave it to me. I've nothing to hide." "Thank you, sir. This case has been in the spotlight. We need to do everything we can."
Lieutenant Kong put on his cap, touching its brim to excuse himself, then turned on his heels to walk away. Vassan wrapped his palm tightly around the voice recorder, knowing that Lieutenant Kong not only wanted to find the evidence, but also wanted to test whose side he was on. He had already chosen for himself. He was going to be an officer who held firm in his righteousness. But it seemed like others were still uncertain of his answer. That's good. This might be an opportunity to learn more about that mysterious man. It's for his case and his own sake.